Well, the Senzo Meyiwa murder trial will resume in the Gauteng High Court in Pretoria this morning. Defense lawyers are expected to continue with the cross-examination of Constable Sizwe Zungu. Now, he's testified that he was with all 5 accused at a hostel on the night that Meyiwa was shot and killed. Now, the defense team say they need to be supplied with all of the photographs downloaded from their clients' phones. But eNCA senior reporter Silindelo Masikane is following through with the story and joins me now to give me the very latest around, of course, the story and case. Lee, a very warm good morning to you, colleague. Let's talk about first and foremost the condition and status, health status of accused number 5. As it stands, what do we know about him and his health status?
Well, we began court proceedings yesterday with Judge Rata Mokgotleng being updated in terms of the order he made for accused number 5, Fiso Ntuli, to receive medical attention. And this is because on Tuesday, court proceedings had to be adjourned early as he was complaining about ill health. So what we understand, of course, is that an order was made and he was then examined by a doctor here in Pretoria, who then, of course, compiled a report and gave it or handed it over to his lawyers, who then in turn handed it up to the judge as evidence that actually took place. And from what we know from the report, it does seem as though the medical examination says he's in good health, but he has been given some treatment. Let's take a listen.
The above patient was seen at the Edenvale Emergency Department on the 12th September 2023 at 13:15 hours. He has a stable medical condition that does not require admission and was discharged with treatment. Signed by Dr. Cheng, Emergency Medical Consultant. Okay.
Now, Slee, I understand the cross-examination also continued. What else did we hear?
So soon after that medical report was handed up, we then continued with cross-examination of Constable Sizwe Zungu. And you know, of course, that he is one of the surprise witnesses in this case who has begun their testimony last week, actually pointing to the fact that he knows the accused and was with them at the hostel on the night Meyiwa was shot and killed. Now, when we resumed with cross-examination, Zungu was being cross-examined by the lawyer for accused number 3, that is Mncube. So we saw Advocate Charles Mnisi once again taking him through some of the photos that have been downloaded from Mncube's phone, which are being used as evidence in this case. And those photos, in essence, show Mncube as well as some of the other accused on the day in which Meyiwa was shot and killed. And the cross-examination from Advocate Charles Mnisi is trying to really poke holes, come up with discrepancies, scrutinize his evidence in chief in terms of what the accused were actually wearing on that day. Because in his evidence in chief, we heard Zungu telling the court that when he met the accused at the hostel, before the party, they were wearing different items of clothing than what we're actually seeing in the photographs that are being used as exhibits in court. So what Advocate Mnisi was trying to do yesterday was to try and highlight those discrepancies. But Zungu kept on repeating that on that particular night, the accused had gone to change, to bath. So the items of clothing that he is referring to were before the pictures were actually, or the photographs were taken. So let's just take a listen to some of that cross-examination.
Was it again a mistake? When you told, listen, when you told the court in your evidence in chief that accused number 2 was amongst those who accompanied you to go buy the liquor, the tops?
It was myself, accused number 3, accused number 2, and even though I cannot say with certainty that Mtogo was this one or that it was either the other person, perhaps the other person from the occupants would be this particular person that is wearing a red jacket or a red top.
Mr. Zungu, explanation is just wishy-washy because you specifically stated in your evidence in chief that you went out with accused number, and I'm not arguing with you, with accused number 2 and number 3, and with 5 in the vehicle. Now in cross-examination, you mentioned a gentleman called Mtogo, and accused number 3, Mtogo, who is not before court, and you also 5 in the vehicle. You don't speak about accused number 2.
My evidence is not confusing.
Thank you.
Yes.
So, Slee, now what's the issue around some of the accused phones and the contents of their phones?
So from what we understand, some of the evidence that's being led, of course, by the state is information that's been downloaded from some of the accused phones. And what we understand is that more phones from the accused had been confiscated and downloaded with, of course, thousands of photographs, but also a lot of data coming from those phones. But from what we understand from the defense is that they have not been given an opportunity to actually go through the downloads. And what the state was saying to the court is that some of the phones were only confiscated recently, so the downloads were only being completed as of yesterday. And the defense then asked the court that they want to have access to all the downloads that have been made from the phones and not those that have been picked by the state, which it's leading in its evidence. So an order was made that the defense would be given the master copy of the disc with all the downloads of the photographs as well as other data that's been requested by the defense. But what we also know is that the defense also requested to have the phones brought physically to the courtroom. So the state said that they could make that happen. However, they would only be able to observe these phones in front of a cell phone analyst, and then of course they would be taken back to where they keep the evidence for this trial in particular. So what we are expecting today is that the defense will be telling the courts that they have received these downloads or perhaps they haven't. So let's just take a listen to what the state prosecutor had to say with regards to that request for from the defense rather to have the downloads from 6 phones, from what we understand, to be handed over to the defense. Let's take a listen.
Those arrangements can be made before the end of this week, my lord. Today's Wednesday. I'm sure at the latest by Friday, those photos can be made available.
But Mr. Mnisi says he's hamstrung.
Yes.
He's coating him.
Yes, but
You know when a horse is hamstrung,
yes,
it can't run.
yes. Just on that particular aspect of the photo, but I would imagine there are other issues that they want to canvass with the, which don't necessarily depend on the photos. We can then proceed on those other aspects.
Yes, Mr. Mnisi?
It's a sequence, my lord. It's a sequence. The way in which we structure our cross-examination, my lord, we just don't do it haphazardly. It's a sequential thing. We don't move from 1 to number 7. We move from 1, we go to 2, we go to 3, we go to 4, up until number 7. Therefore, to request us to proceed on other items, my lord, what this witness has said, I don't think that's the trajectory that we want to take for now, my lord. We want to take it sequentially up to the point at which we want to arrive, my lord. Thank you.
Yeah, fine, thanks.
Oh, I see. That's where we'll leave it for now and come back to you, colleague, as soon as there are any other developments surrounding the Senzo Meyiwa murder trial. It continues, of course, with eNCA senior reporter Silindelo Masikane being inside court live for us to give us the very latest updates.